middle school in Alderdice High School.
People running for their lives, panicking. This video from inside a church in Brighton Heights. A funeral was being live streamed when a barrage of bullets was fired right outside.
We need to make sure that this never happens again. And we will be working around the clock to do whatever's necessary.
Imagine you're at a funeral, trying to say goodbye to a loved one. Suddenly, the sound of gunshots fills the church. This isn't a scene from a movie. It's a true story that happened in Pittsburgh. And the craziest part is, the man being buried was killed in another shooting just 13 days before. To understand how a funeral service turned into a second crime scene, we have to go back to the beginning. This story really starts with John James Hornezes Jr. He was a 20-year-old kid from Pittsburgh's North Side. People who knew him said he was ambitious and just trying to figure out his life, like a lot of young men his age. But on the streets where he grew up, small disagreements could turn into big problems very quickly. The trouble seems to have started over a simple street argument. It was about territory, who was allowed to hang out on which corners. It was the kind of thing that usually ends with some yelling or maybe a fist fight. But this time, it was different. John's group was having issues with another group of guys, which included a 19-year-old named Sharon Troutman and a 21-year-old named Jelon Hines. The tension between them started to build online and through text messages. Just a day before the first shooting, John posted a picture of himself with his friends, smiling and making hand signs. We don't know what the caption said, but police later found messages that showed the conflict was getting serious. People were making threats and daring each other to meet up. The chosen location for this meeting was a Sunoco gas station on Cedar Avenue. It was a place both groups used, a sort of neutral spot in the neighborhood. They probably thought that since it was a public place with security cameras, things wouldn't get too out of hand. They were wrong. As they were planning to confront each other, they didn't think about all the other people who use that gas station every day. People who were just living their lives, completely unaware of the danger that was coming. Two of those people were Betty Jean Eight and Jacqueline Mahalik. Betty was 59 years old, a grandmother to 7 kids. She was just waiting for her bus, something she did all the time. Jacqueline was 33, a mom who was hurrying past the gas station on her way to her late-night shift at work. Neither of them knew the men who were about to show up, and they had no idea they were walking into the middle of a deadly feud. On the night of October 15th, everything came to a head. Security cameras at the Sunoco tell the story of what happened minute by minute. Around 9:45 p.m., John Hornezes Jr. and his friends arrived. They got out of their car but didn't go inside the store. They were just waiting. A few minutes later, a black SUV drove by the gas station, circled around, and then passed by again. The driver was checking to see who was there. At 9:55 p.m., Betty Eight got to her usual bus stop right next to the gas station. She put her purse down and checked the schedule. Her bus was due to arrive in about 13 minutes. She would never get on it. Just 3 minutes after that, Jacqueline Mahalik walked by, quickly looking at her phone. She was running a little late for work. At 10 p.m., the black SUV returned and stopped. Sharon Troutman was in the passenger seat. The men in that car were armed, and so were John Hornezes and his friends. Witnesses heard someone shout across the parking lot, "What's up now?" What happened next took less than a minute. Both groups pulled out guns and started shooting at each other right there in the gas station lot.
Bullets flew everywhere. The police would later find 23 shell casings from 2 different types of guns. Betty 8, waiting at the bus stop, was hit. Maybe she froze, or maybe it all happened too fast for her to even realize what was going on. Jacqueline Mahalik was caught directly in the crossfire as she walked down the sidewalk. She was just in the wrong place at the exact wrong second.
By 10:03, the shooting was over. The black SUV sped off. John Hornezes Jr. was lying in the parking lot, and one of his friends was hurt. Bediak had collapsed at the bus stop, and Jacqueline Mahalik was on the ground nearby. The first 911 calls started coming in. Even though the hospital was only a block away and ambulances arrived in 2 minutes, it was too late. John, Betty, and Jacqueline were all pronounced dead. 3 people lost their lives that night over a street argument, but the violence didn't end there. It was only the beginning. The men who got away were already planning their next move, and it would lead to even more tragedy. After the shooting at the gas station, you might think things would calm down, but that's not how it works on these streets. When someone is killed, there's often a response. The violence doesn't just stop, it creates a chain reaction. While the city was in shock over the deaths of 3 people, some were already thinking about evening the score. The day after the shooting, Pittsburgh's mayor stood near the crime scene with bloodstains still on the sidewalk behind him. He spoke to the news cameras, asking for the community to come together and help the police.
The community. I know it's tough right now. I know that there's a lot of families and friends who are hurting right now. And I know a lot of them feel like they should do something. So I wanted to do something with you. I want you to call and tell us what you know. I need you to speak up and say something. They shot up the sanctuary today. And I know that a lot of people are hurting. Let me acknowledge that. I know that. But to go out there and retaliate doesn't make anything better.
He begged for anyone who knew something to speak up and prevent more violence. He was talking to the whole city. But in some corners of the North Side, a very different conversation was happening. It wasn't about peace. It was about payback. While John Hornezes' family was grieving and starting to plan his funeral, they knew the danger wasn't over. They heard the rumors and the threats. They knew that a funeral could easily become the next target. At the same time, the police were working around the clock to find the shooters. They pulled together a huge team of detectives to go through every piece of evidence they could find. They looked at security footage from the gas station, a nearby grocery store, ATM cameras, and even traffic cameras. They pieced together the movements of the black SUV from every angle. It didn't take them long to get a clear shot of the license plate. Within hours, they identified the owner of the car as a 30-year-old man named Samuel Pegas, who already had a criminal record. The police were building their case, but then something happened that they didn't expect. People started calling the tip line. Not just 1 or 2 people, but dozens. People were saying they saw who was in the car, or they knew where they went afterwards. The reason so many people were talking was because of Bediak and Jacqueline Mahalik. Killing a grandmother waiting for her bus and a mother on her way to work crossed the line. Even for people who normally wouldn't talk to the police, this was different. This wasn't just street beef anymore. Innocent people had been killed, and the community was angry. With help from these tips, the police started making arrests. They found Jalon Hines, one of the men from the anti-Hornezes group, at a hospital where he was being treated for a gunshot wound to his leg. He was charged for his role in the deaths of the 2 women. A day later, U.S. Marshals found and arrested 19-year-old Sharon Troutman, who was in the passenger seat of the SUV. Tests on the bullets found at the scene showed that his gun was the one that killed John Hornezes Jr. But arresting a few people wasn't going to stop what was coming. For some, this wasn't about justice from the police. It was about getting revenge themselves. As the arrests were happening, the Hornez family was making funeral arrangements. They chose a church called Destiny of Faith on Brighton Road. It was meant to be a place of peace, a safe space for them to say their final goodbyes. But almost as soon as the funeral was announced, the threats started up again. They were sent through text messages and posted on social media, then quickly deleted. The message was clear. John's funeral was not going to be peaceful.
Knowing this, the family did exactly what they were supposed to do. They officially requested police protection for the service. The city approved the request and assigned 2 officers to be there. The funeral was just 2 days away. This is where a simple mistake led to an absolute disaster. When the officers were given their assignment, someone gave them the wrong address. Instead of being sent to Destiny of Faith Church, they were sent to a funeral home 3 blocks away. On the morning of the funeral, the 2 officers arrived at the funeral home at 7 a.m. and saw an empty parking lot. There was no sign of a funeral. They called it in, and dispatch told them to stand by. They waited, checked again at 8 a.m., and still saw nothing. By 8:45 a.m., thinking there was no funeral there, they left. Meanwhile, just 3 blocks away, hundreds of mourners were arriving at the real location, Destiny of Faith Church. John's godmother, Paige Davis, was one of the first people to notice something was wrong. She looked around and saw no police cars, no officers anywhere. She asked the funeral staff where the police were, and they told her they were supposed to be there. By 11 a.m., the church was filled with 300 people. The organ music started, and the prayers began. Everyone inside was focused on mourning a 20-year-old man, completely unaware that outside, another group of shooters was quietly moving into position. The protection they had asked for was miles away, and the church was now a vulnerable target. Inside Destiny of Faith Church, the funeral service for John Hornezes Jr. was going on. The pastor was up front, talking about forgiveness and the pain of losing someone so young. The mourners were trying to find some comfort, to say goodbye in peace. But outside, a group of people had gathered with a completely different intention. A security camera at the church entrance captured it all. Just after 12 o'clock, figures in dark clothing started appearing at the corner of the building. They were taking up positions. Then, at 12:04 p.m., the first gunshot rang out. For a second, everyone inside the church froze. People wondered if it was just a car backfiring. But then another shot came, and another, and then the sound of rapid gunfire. The security camera showed the shooters running, firing from different spots. This wasn't a random act. It was a planned attack.
On the front steps of the church, where people had been hugging and sharing memories just minutes earlier, 6 people were hit by bullets and fell to the ground. Inside, there was complete panic. People dropped to the floor, not to pray, but to hide from the gunfire. Mothers shielded their children with their own bodies, and others ducked behind the wooden pews. Someone screamed, "They're shooting at the church!" The pastor, still at the front, spoke into the microphone, his voice cutting through the chaos, telling everyone to get down. The whole attack lasted for only 90 seconds, but in that minute and a half, a funeral was turned into a scene of terror. The casket was left alone at the altar, and funeral programs were scattered all over the floor as people scrambled for the exits, not knowing if they were running towards safety or more danger. Then, as quickly as it started, there was silence. The sirens got louder and louder as police cars and ambulances raced to the scene they were supposed to have been at all along. They found 6 people wounded outside and a church full of traumatized mourners who had come to bury one victim of violence, only to nearly become victims themselves.
One of the most powerful images from that day was of police officers, in their uniforms, carrying John Hornezes Jr.'s casket out of the church and to the hearse. The family and friends who were supposed to do it were either wounded or in shock. It was a sad symbol of the protection that had arrived too late. In the hours that followed, the police made arrests. They took a 19-year-old named Sean Davis and a 16-year-old into custody, charging them with the shooting at the church. The motive was exactly what everyone suspected. It was retaliation for the gas station shooting that had killed John. And that shooting was retaliation for something that came before it. It was a destructive cycle of revenge that seemed to have no end, where no one could even remember what the original argument was about. As the weeks went on, the families of the innocent victims from the first shooting spoke out. Betty 8's daughter begged for people to put down their guns, saying, "It harms the city, the world, it hurts." Jacqueline Mahalik's mother spoke about the pain her grandchildren now face, saying her children will still live their lives without her. In the end, this chain of violence left a trail of destruction. Several young men were either dead or in prison. 2 innocent women were killed simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And an entire community was left shaken, wondering if any place could ever truly be safe again. If you go to that corner on Cedar Avenue today, you might still see a small memorial with flowers and candles, a quiet reminder of the lives that were lost for no good reason.